If you're watching this video, there's a reasonable chance your life feels like it's not working right now. Maybe something you built collapsed. Maybe a relationship ended, or should end but hasn't yet. Maybe you wake up and the life you've created doesn't fit anymore, and you don't know why. Most people, when this happens, conclude that something has gone wrong, that they've made mistakes, that they need to fix something. Today, I want to offer a different possibility, not as comfort, but as an accurate alternative explanation. What if what feels like falling apart is actually the most reliable sign that your consciousness is evolving, and the disintegration you're experiencing is not the problem, but the process? Here are the 7 signs, backed by both neuroscience and the oldest spiritual traditions on Earth. Sign 1. Your old life suddenly feels like a costume. You haven't changed your circumstances dramatically, but something has shifted underneath them, and now they fit differently, like wearing clothes from a previous decade that technically still fit, but clearly belong to someone else. Psychologists call this an identity disruption, the point where the self-concept that organized your previous choices becomes insufficient for who you're becoming. It's not a malfunction, it's the earliest sign of genuine psychological growth. The Vedantic tradition described this as viveka, the arising of discrimination, the capacity to see clearly what is real versus what was simply familiar. It's uncomfortable because familiarity and reality are not always the same thing. If your old life feels like someone else's, you haven't lost your way, you've outgrown your map. Sign 2. You start seeing patterns you couldn't see before. In relationships, in your own behavior, in how situations repeat. You begin to notice that the same dynamics keep appearing in different forms, the same lesson in different costumes. This is not paranoia, it's called pattern recognition, and it's a measurable cognitive shift associated with the development of what psychologists call meta-awareness, the capacity to observe your own patterns from outside them. Most people can't access this until their consciousness has developed to the point where they're no longer fully inside the pattern, which is why you couldn't see it before, and you can now. The Stoics called this the view from above, the capacity to see your life not as something happening to you, but as something you're participating in. The patterns always existed. You simply became capable of noticing them.
Sign 3. Being alone feels different than it used to. Not lonelier, different, somehow fuller, as though the silence has become company rather than absence. Research on what psychologists call solitude tolerance shows that the capacity to be genuinely alone, not distracted, not consuming, simply present, increases measurably as psychological maturity develops. People who can't tolerate solitude aren't weaker. They simply haven't yet developed the internal relationship with themselves that makes their own company feel sufficient. The Christian mystical tradition called this being in cell, the development of an interior life rich enough to sustain you without constant external input. When solitude starts feeling like company rather than punishment, something significant has shifted inside. Sign 4. Your circle is shrinking, and it doesn't feel like a loss. You're canceling plans you used to eagerly make. You're spending less time with people you've known for years and feeling vaguely guilty about the fact that it doesn't bother you more. This is not antisocial behavior, it's selective alignment. As your frequency changes, the connections that were built around your previous frequency naturally become less resonant. Attachment researchers have found that genuine psychological growth consistently changes relationship patterns, not because growing people become more isolated, but because they become more specific about what connection feels like at their new frequency. This was described across both Buddhist and Stoic traditions as the natural consequence of changing internally. Your external world reorganizes to reflect your new internal state, not immediately, but inevitably. If your circle is shrinking and you feel strangely okay about it, you're not becoming cold, you're becoming calibrated. Sign 5. You realize you can't go back, and you've stopped trying. There's a specific moment in every genuine evolution where you recognize, without drama, that a previous version of your life is no longer available to you. Not because circumstances won't allow it, but because you couldn't fully inhabit it anymore, even if they did. Developmental psychologists describe this as a threshold crossing, the point where the previous stage of development becomes structurally inaccessible because you've moved beyond its organizing framework. This is often experienced as grief, and it genuinely is. You are losing something real, the comfort and familiarity of a self you've inhabited for years. The grief is appropriate, but underneath the grief, if you look carefully, there's something that isn't grief at all, a kind of quiet clarity, a recognition that the loss is also a liberation, that you're not being pushed out of your old life. You're being freed from it. Sign 6. Your body knew before your mind caught up. Looking back, you can see now that your body was signaling this shift long before your conscious mind acknowledged it. The unexplained fatigue, the reduced appetite for things that used to excite you, the physical restlessness in environments that previously felt fine. The field of interoception, the brain's processing of internal body signals, is now well established as a primary source of information about psychological and social changes. Your body processes shifts in your frequency before your analytical mind develops the language to name them. The Sufi tradition described this as the heart knowing before the mind, not mystically, but practically. The heart as a sensing organ with its own perceptual intelligence. If you can look back now and see that your body was already telling you, it wasn't confusion. It was information arriving in the only language available at the time.
Sign 7. You've stopped explaining yourself and started expressing yourself. There's a specific shift that happens when consciousness genuinely evolves. The energy that used to go into justifying, defending, and explaining who you are begins going somewhere else entirely. Not because you've become arrogant, because you've become certain in a way that doesn't require external confirmation. Research on identity development shows that the highest levels of what psychologists call ego integrity, a coherent, stable sense of self, correlate with significantly reduced anxiety about others' perceptions. Not indifference, a settled quality that doesn't need the outside to confirm what's been recognized inside. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The evolution he was describing wasn't a philosophy, it was a developmental state. If you've stopped performing yourself for others and started simply being yourself, that's not arrogance, that's arrival. 7 signs, ancient traditions and modern neuroscience pointing at the same thing from different directions. The disintegration isn't the problem, it's the process. The falling apart isn't the ending, it's the prerequisite. What remains genuinely mysterious is this: why does genuine evolution consistently require the dissolution of something previous? Science can describe the mechanism. It cannot fully explain why growth and loss are structurally linked in every tradition that has mapped this territory with any depth. That gap between what we can measure and what we can explain is where something worth sitting with lives. Drop the number of the sign that described you most accurately in the comments. I read every one. Subscribe for decoded consciousness content every week. You are the architect of your own frequency.